Morning, everyone. My name is John Greden, and I will be introduced, but what I wanted to do before doing anything else is to welcome you to the day and to turn this over now to Steve Kunkel, who will give some kind of formal acknowledgement on the basis of the university. But thank you so much for joining us all. Steve?
Thank you, John. My name is Steve Kunkel, and I'm the Interim Vice Provost for Academic Affairs and the Interim Dean of the Rackham Graduate School. I also am a professor in the medical school and still have a lab where we study immunological phenomena and host defense. This conference really could not have happened without the efforts of several individuals and university efforts which I would like to acknowledge. First, I would like to really thank the former Vice Provost and former Dean of Rackham, Dr. Earl Lewis, who is now the Provost of Emory University, who came up with the idea of having an event at which our university constituencies and our community agencies could come together to discuss how to heighten awareness of and remove the stigma associated with one of a leading mental health issues in the country, and that is depression, and especially depression associated with the university and the university students. Second, I'd like to thank the University of Michigan Depression Center, and particularly Dr. John Greden, for chairing the advisory board for a third straight year, as well as the advisory board itself. These individuals lent their ideas, their time, and their energy to ensure the success of this conference. Third, I would like to thank all of the generous supporters of the Depression Center, and especially those who contributed significantly the number of deans throughout the university community to make this a success. And finally, I would like to thank two individuals who really made this Depression Center work, and that is Sarah Newland and Lynn Shivers, who actually were the backbone of pulling together this conference. In any given year, about 10% of the population, or about 18.8 million American adults, suffer from some depressive natures, and that number is actually increasing. Not only is the economic cost for this condition high, but the cost in human suffering really is difficult to estimate. Depression often interferes with normal functioning, causes pain and suffering for not only those who have this disorder, but for those who care about these people and work with them. Such awareness has led to an increased interest and concern regarding a closely related and often neglected problem, and that is depression in college students. This conference marks the third annual national university-sponsored event to explore the issue of depression among college students. We really cannot address all of the concerns over the next 2 days. Conquering this problem cannot be accomplished through only one department or only one university event. It'll take the time of and efforts of administrators, faculty, staff, students, the medical community, and parents working together. The record number of pre-registrants to this meeting is an indication that this issue has truly garnered a significant level of attention. You may leave this conference more informed and more determined to remove the stigma of depression with knowledge and understanding of this disorder. At this time, I would like to introduce Lester Montz. Is he here? Lester Montz, to say a few words, and then I will return to introduce Dr. John Greden. Dr. Montz.
Good morning. On behalf of the University of Michigan, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's conference. We're all here because we're all committed to learning about depression and the toll it takes on our college students, our colleagues, and our loved ones. This conference is an ideal way to fight the stigmas about depression through knowledge and understanding. We know that silence about this illness helps no one. Conferences such as this have and do achieve a dual benefit. You, the participants, will share the knowledge with one another, and you will help dispel the shame and understanding that has hindered the treatment of mental illness. As a community of caring people, we applaud your efforts. The University of Michigan is the right place to be if you want to join with others to promote research and education on depression. We are, of course, very proud that the first multidisciplinary depression center is located here in the University of Michigan health system. And this is another sign that the university remains at the cutting edge of healthcare and treatment. It's often the case in a community of scholars and specialists that people speak various disciplinary languages. And I would venture to say that very few of you here today are familiar with tent analysis, lab notation, organograms, Tubbs notation, or the Sachs-Hornbostel system of musical instrument classification. This is the disciplinary jargon of my research in ethnomusicology. But through the efforts of many here on the campus and beyond, we now have a means to understand the causes and effects of depression. And in that regard, we are very proud of the documentary that was produced by Dr. Pat McCune of the Rackham Graduate School for the first Depression Conference. The video called The View from Here tells the story of students who grapple with the depression along with other challenges of college life. It also includes testimony by faculty and staff. For many of us, this puts a real face on this terrible illness, depression. When former dean of the Rackham Graduate School, Earl Lewis, showed this video documentary to the academic program group, which is the gathering twice a month of the deans and the provost senior staff, we were very impressed by the quality of the content of the documentary, but we were more impressed by the fact that it put real faces on the issues surrounding depression. It showed our students, our faculty, our staff members, people who had struggled with and overcome the challenges that accompany depression. In a somewhat shocking manner, it heightened awareness for all of us who are less familiar with the signs of this debilitating condition. I'm also pleased to report that this video documentary has been repeatedly broadcast on campus, on local cable stations, and on PBS. We have distributed over 500 copies nationwide, and just to put a plug in for the Rackham Graduate School, you can secure a copy of it by going to the Rackham Graduate School website. In addition to establishing our Depression Center and creating The View from Here, Michigan has developed a guide of campus resources that we distribute to help families, faculty, and staff provide helpful referrals to students and others about depression. The university's mindfulness about depression is consistent with a recent announcement by President Mary Sue Coleman, in which she outlined that the Michigan Health Community Initiative will work to promote health in our community and develop more cost-effective ways of health delivery. Her interests in this initiative are consistent with our concerns today and tomorrow. The accurate diagnosis of depression, coupled with proper intervention, can reduce the toll this disease has on our society. And we're very proud to spearhead many of these efforts here at the University of Michigan. So Mary Sue Coleman, our Provost Paul Courant, and I are pleased that you have come to the University of Michigan for this very important conference. And I wish you a very successful 2 days. Thank you.
At this time, it is a true pleasure for me to introduce one of the icons in our medical school, and that is Dr. John Greden. He is the Rachel Upjohn Professor of Psychiatry and Clinical Neurosciences, chair of the University of Michigan Department of Psychiatry, and executive director of the University of Michigan Depression Center. He is a research professor in the University of Michigan Mental Health Research Institute. He joined our faculty at the University of Michigan Medical School in 1974 and was appointed chair of the Department of Psychiatry in 1985. His clinical research activities have emphasized the study of the longitudinal course of depression. He has linked stress glucocorticoids and depressive reoccurrences and has developed clinical strategies to prevent such reoccurrences. He has received continuous NIH funding for 25 years, has published approximately 270 scientific papers pertaining to depression, and edited a number of books, including The Treatment of Reoccurring Depression. Dr. Greden is the past president of both the Psychiatric Research Society and the Society of Biological Psychiatry. He was the past editor-in-chief of the Journal of Psychiatric Research and senior editor of scientific publications for the American College of Neuropsychopharmacology. He is chair of the Council of Research for the American Psychiatric Association and president of the American Association of Chairs of Department of Psychiatry. Please welcome me in asking Dr. Greden to come to the microphone.
Thank you, Steve. Those are very nice compliments, and it sort of makes me wonder whether I'm spending enough time at home. And with that, I am very glad that some of you are not home today and are here with us. What my job is, in just a few brief minutes, is to thank you for coming, to indicate our goals, and you can see them on the screen, and they were up there a little bit earlier, and to basically try to suggest that we see this as a participatory conference. We want your inputs. We would like this to be action-oriented. This is not one of those conferences that will prove to be of optimal value if we do nothing but talk. It's time afterwards to take these things and to continue putting them into motion. And as is suggested in the last line, all of us are the agents of improvement in addressing this. So a little quiz, and you all know the answer already based on what Lester and everybody else, you can sort of see the Larry Kings and the George Stephanopoulos and the Mike Wallaces and a variety of others, and then some additional names, Buzz Aldrin, Terry Bradshaw, John Howell, Lawton Childs, Mike Wallace, etc. And all of them have something in common. They all have been open in discussing their depression, and they all have been open in labeling it as a disorder, and I think there's a message there. What I'm going to do is to suggest to you that today, as we do this, we're trying to push knowledge. We're also trying to push understanding. And in a funny way, with a very brief introduction, I made an assumption that all of you are frankly walking in here with some awareness and expertise about this topic. I think we have, as a society, pushed this a lot. There are websites if you want to learn more. There are plenty of materials. Lester made reference to the videos that are out there. But I thought it would be a disservice if I didn't at least give you what I call this Cliff Notes version of depression to make sure we're all on the same page. So people use the words stress and clinical depression and unipolar depression and bipolar depression, and many of those, I think, confuse us in their jargon. I would like to suggest that you'll hear a lot today about the top two, stress and clinical depression. And the evidence now conclusively shows that they are alterations of brain functions. We know that genes are involved. We know that events of life are involved. These are not biological versus environmental. They're almost always interactive. They're always sort of feeding on each other. We can now measure a lot of these things and visualize them. You're seeing just a couple brain scans up there, neuroimaging as it's called. And yet, with all of the advances that have occurred, the picture down below, by the way, is the signing of the Decade of the Brain resolution in 1990. And we've had 15 years of just explosive growth in neurosciences. and in psychosocial behavior sciences, and in a variety of new therapeutic techniques, psychotherapeutic techniques that have been developed. And yet, depression remains underdiagnosed, undertreated, or misdiagnosed, or mistreated, and it's our assumption that the lack of knowledge and stigma are two key variables in making that happen. We're addressing the latter today. So your mini medical school is that you have genetic vulnerabilities, and they interface with stress and trauma, and those produce alterations. If you look on the right side, you actually see that stress, alcohol, drugs, poor sleep, a variety of other factors all sort of make those worse. Exercise, antidepressants, psychotherapy, probably for those of us at this time of year, a little bright light. I just came back from Florida. It helped. But the net result for some who have all of those vulnerabilities is depression or bipolar. And you heard the figures that were given by Steve. This is a manifestation that we all know. This is a brief clinical description. And we know the terms sadness, crying, gloominess, blues, loss of pleasure, social withdrawal, difficulties in staying with tasks. For students, it turns out to be studying problems, fears, apprehension, staying in the room, withdrawal, changes in appetite and weight, and that can be both up and down. Unexplained pains. Physical symptoms are frequently the key manifestation and the presentation for those with depressive disorders. Sleeping too little or too much. It's, again, appetite can go up in about a third. Sleep goes up in about a third. We all associate it with coming down all the time. That's not always the case. Irritability or frustration, the anxiety features that I've already mentioned, all of those features that you see up there then sometimes lead to the pattern of, okay, I have to start treating this. The use of alcohol, for example, or other types of agents to try and treat sleep disturbances or mood disturbances, frankly, is almost always a confounding and complicating variable. And then finally, the one that we all are most concerned about is the manifestation of some people feel so miserable that they don't want to go on living. And there still are about 35,000 deaths a year attributable to suicide in America alone. I just came back along with several of the participants in the conference several months ago from Beijing, and they have over 300,000. That's largely because of population differences, but also a higher rate. But we should be really concerned about our rate. Losing 35,000, and many of them are youth, is an unforgivable situation, and that's why we're here. The World Health Organization has indicated that depression and bipolar are arguably the world's leaders in disability and burden, and they're probably, in American jargon, second in cost when you start asking what are the dollars and cents implications. It was an astounding figure to me, and frankly to the authors who put this together, to read that about 11% of all of the disability from the 100 most important disorders in the world comes from clinical depression. 11%. That's huge. And again, back to this issue, it's often the underdiagnosis, undertreatment, and those are linked to lack of knowledge and stigma. So paradoxically, if I've already told you this, we now can see this. You can actually visualize these things. This is actually late onset depression in a comparison group, and those areas that are in red aren't supposed to be there. And we have the Surgeon General saying, quote, there's no scientific reason to differentiate between mental health and other kinds of health. Mental illnesses are real illnesses. But the perception still says, 2001, depression is a state of mind. And sometimes that sort of means a bunch of things. Now, another little quiz. Susan Sontag, when she was alive, basically said, quote, it seems that societies need to have one illness which attaches blame to its victims. Any disease that is treated as a mystery and feared will also be felt to be morally, if not literally, contagious. What was she talking about? Her topic, intriguingly, at that time, was her cancer. Now, we've dramatically reduced the stigma once associated with cancers. We have a national network of 74 cancer centers now, and this is everywhere. Katie Couric, as I mentioned last year, has her colonoscopy on national TV. And in my judgment, we can and we are, but we must work harder to do the same thing with depressive illnesses. And that's why Michigan, as you heard Lester mention, started the first comprehensive depression center. That's the projected building. The groundbreaking is underway. I'm fond of saying, this is the south side of the building. You'll notice all the windows for those of us who like light. This is a way of trying to ensure that there's more. And that's why all of us need to keep repeating that clinical depression is not all of those things on this slide, something that you can, quote, just snap out of a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It's not just in your head in the way that society means it. It is, in some ways, in your head, but not in a figurative way. It's not just, quote, normal. Get over it. Suck it up, etc. It's not just part of aging, and it's not only in women. And there's a campaign underway on this campus that you'll hear more about during these 2 days, and we hope to roll it out over the entire countryside with NIMH materials called Real Men, Real Depression. And at this point in time, many of you, I hope, will express interest in taking it home with you. And it's also why we need to have a wonderful 2 days of learning and implementing. We have arranged some keynote speakers to help set the tone. The concurrent sessions then will sort of help develop strategies for the next steps. There are live vignettes to illustrate real life, some of these done by our students and others. We have panel discussions with effective spokespersons who are actually saying what they've done. And then there's even some music and some camaraderie. It's in your handouts, but there's a concert tonight that all of you are invited to. And I would hope that when you go home that you use proper terminology and data, that you correct your colleagues, friends, associates, family members if they say things. It doesn't help to stay silent, as Dr. Mons said. There's a matter-of-fact approach, and I strongly encourage my medical colleagues and others to do this as well. It's why when we started the Depression Center, I was fairly insistent that we call it the Depression Center, not something else, because you don't change stigma by trying to change names. You change stigma by conveying knowledge, hope, and progress, and we can and are doing that. I think we need to all encourage involvement in this cause, and models for me turn out to be, I mentioned this last year as well, cancer survivors. I loved it about 7 or 8 years ago when Max Wisha, who's the director of our cancer center, had a session at a Michigan football game, and in the halftime he invited all of the cancer survivors to come out of the stands. And there were about 7,000 or 8,000 people who walked down on the field and were proud to wave their hands. We need to get to some of this for our disorders as well. And I think we can emphasize the gains, the potential, the data, the progress. We're having explosive knowledge. We are making gains. They're wonderful. We have a long way to go yet, but it's really good. And with all of that, if you do all of that, our lives will be better, and frankly, so will those of our grandchildren. And this is always my excuse to show mine. And once we learn more and do more, then I think this is Julia when she was much younger, and this is Ben. And I would hope that we give a new meaning to the word "Go Blue" at this point for those at Michigan. So with that, it's my pleasure now to move on and to actually